following presentation, Dr. Anne O'Grady from the School of Social Sciences of Nottingham Trent University shares her view on professional doctorates. She talks about the key characteristics of a professional doctor and how it differs from a traditional Doctor of Philosophy. By reflecting on her experiences of supervising professional doctorates, she highlights some of the challenges and merits associated with achieving a professional doctorate.
So what I wanted to do today was spend a little bit of time talking about what is a professional doctorate. So you will have heard of a lot of knowledge today and you've valued that knowledge, but how does that knowledge get transferred into industry and how does that knowledge become valuable? Is it because of years of expertise or is it something that we can validate through qualifications? And so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time telling you a bit about me, telling you a little bit about the conceptual framework that I use to think about knowledge acquisition, and that's the Bourdieu's framework. I'll consider some of the challenges associated with completing a professional doctorate and actually the merits associated with completing and achieving a doctorate, and then draw some key conclusions. So I am an academic. I studied for a PhD many moons ago, and I lead the education doctorate programme at Nottingham Trent University. I've been teaching, supervising and examining professional doctorates both in the UK and here in Hong Kong for about 15 years. So I'm very familiar with Hong Kong. I've been travelling to Hong Kong for a long time. So the professional doctorate has become increasingly interesting. For a long time, knowledge was created in universities by academics and shared by academics. And from an academic perspective, questions have often been asked about, so what are the merits of a Doctor of Philosophy then, if you're just talking to yourself? What is the role and purpose and value of a professional doctorate to knowledge construction and understanding of that knowledge for the academic community? From a professional perspective, questions are asked regarding the contributions in engaging in such a significant piece of work alongside one's professional commitments. And anybody who's undertaking a professional doctorate will know that they're generally holding down quite a substantial position in their career, and undertaking a professional doctorate qualification alongside that is quite challenging. From an individual perspective, prospective candidates ask these sorts of questions, but they also say, can I really do this alongside my significant work? Can I do this in terms of my family? What are the compromises that I'm going to have to make? Will the outcomes be valued, and will they be valuable, and by whom? And will it enhance my career prospects? So all of these questions are valid, and having worked with doctoral candidates, like I say, for the last 15 years, the authenticity of the professional doctorate, I can say with some confidence, has real validity and credibility. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit today, and to consider some of the critical issues that are facing the profession. So by engaging in a professional doctorate programme, individuals set out to undertake a systematic piece of research to provide an informed, evidence-based answer to the challenges that they're facing within their practice. And they often want to improve that practice and to share their new knowledge and their new understandings of the challenges that are facing with their peers. And their peers are often in that place of industry. And it shouldn't be underestimated that this is a significant ambition, requiring a great deal of commitment from individuals and always ensuring compromises in other parts of people's lives. Completing a professional doctorate then requires tenacity and resilience, and it's unlikely that any task will be completed in any less than 4 years. So I just want to provide a quick review of the literature around the rise of the professional doctorate. So there is a review of the literature provides some consensus views of the key characteristics of the doctorate. It tells us that in order to complete a doctorate, you can do it in various different ways now. You can have an integrated PhD, PhD by publication, distance learning. But how do we understand that as academics, and how do we value that? And what is its purpose? But it is the educational doctorate that one I'm most familiar with and I want to talk about in more detail. There are a number of distinctive characteristics of a professional doctorate. Mostly, fundamentally, it's work-based. Candidates are studying for a doctorate in a work setting. It's a commitment to influence, in some ways, the profession in which the research is being undertaken. And it is part-time. One of the distinguishing features of a professional doctorate is the teaching model. So doctorates are largely based on a model of coursework and a series of modules which are supported and facilitated by academics for summative assessment, and then the crafting of a final thesis, which is examined in the same way as a traditional PhD, with viva by both internal and external examiners. For some programs, the candidate will have a supervisor identified to support them throughout the life of their doctoral journey. For other programs, the supervisor is identified once the candidate has confirmed their thesis project. But in the same way as a PhD, a professional doctoral candidate is guided by their supervisor, and that supervisor-candidate relationship is a core characteristic, I argue, of successful outcome. There are several critical issues that need to be considered when arguing for the intrinsic value of the professional doctorate. Indeed, there are critical opportunities within the doctoral process which shouldn't be missed, underestimated, or undervalued. The positioning of oneself in the research process, being an insider researcher, often challenges the validity of the knowledge that results from a professional doctorate. But in my experience of supervising doctoral candidates, students routinely enrol for such programs because they've identified the issues that they want to seek an evidence-based answer for. Now, one of the ways that we can think about the contribution of a professional doctorate is by using Bourdieu's conceptual anthology. It would take quite some time to go through the detail of this conceptual anthology, but fundamentally what Bourdieu has argued is that in undertaking any endeavour educationally, we have the potential contribution to influence both ourselves, the field in which we are working, and the capital which we seek. And in his conversation about capital, he talks about three distinctive types of capital: social capital, economic capital, and cultural capital. And it's often the idea of economic capital that brings people to the door of a professional doctorate study. But the one that results most fundamentally is the social capital growth of the individual. So what I'm going to do is, reflecting on my own experience, what are the key challenges and merits of undertaking a professional doctorate? So in doing that, I've looked at my own supervision records, my records of examination as an internal examiner and an external examiner of doctorates. And these are some of the challenges that I surmised. And anybody who's thinking about undertaking a doctorate should take the time to think about what kind of doctorate they want to study and the implications of those. And there are not an undue amount of challenges that should be faced. And I'll highlight a couple of these in some of the case study examples that I'm going to present in a minute. However, the merits do outweigh the challenges. There are many merits associated with studying for and completing a professional doctorate, like I've said, at an individual level, at the level of knowledge growth, and at the potential for outcomes to the profession. In trying to exemplify what those challenges are and what those merits are, I wanted to present to you some case studies. I just wanted to let you know that these aren't the real names of students. They are pseudonyms that I've created. And in some instances, these are direct experiences of students. And in other instances, they are an amalgamation of students' experiences. And these are particularly talk to the distinctive nature of Western providers delivering a professional doctorate in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong students studying for a Western professional doctorate, as well as the routine challenges and merits of a doctoral qualification. So one of the challenges that I listed in that table, which I just showed to you very quickly, was around cultural sensitivities. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Jim. Jim was a Hong Kong student. He has recently successfully completed his professional doctorate. And throughout the programme, Jim was an extremely thoughtful and dedicated student. And it was clear from reading Jim's reflections, and it's just noteworthy, at Nottingham Trent University, as part of the examination process, all our doctoral students are required to submit a reflective journal on their experience of the doctoral programme, which is examined by both the internal and external examiners at Vivas and talked about. And also, it's worth noting our programme is built on a series of workshops that students attend 2 or 3 times a year. So reading Jim's reflections when he was studying for the doctorate, he had encountered some real significant challenges at an individual level. One of the examples of the challenges that he described was cultural. And, we come to any experience, don't we, with multiple identities, whether they're professional identities, research identities. But importantly for Jim, it was his cultural identity that was questioned and challenged during the process of his study. And the rise particularly of his distinctive cultural awareness, which was heightened during that programme. So during the modules, during the workshops, students from eclectic sets of backgrounds, studying for eclectic doctorates, come together to focus on teaching, learning and understanding about research design, methodology and methods. So these are skills required of any doctoral candidate, whatever route they're choosing to take. But in this case, Jim was participating in this programme, and he describes himself as somebody who was only for the first time encountering working alongside students from a Western background. And he noted that he felt students from that background had more initiative than him. Not necessarily had more initiative, but certainly demonstrated more initiative in the workshops. They were more outspoken. And as an Asian doctoral candidate, he was felt to be much more reserved and much more thoughtful and much less keen to share his views in the workshop. But throughout the period of the programme, his attitudes and behaviours and objectives in relation to his educational interactions changed from somebody who was quiet to somebody who was very innovative and very confident in his originality. And being sensitive to cultural commonalities and differences is a real key for providers of doctoral programmes, particularly when we're moving forward to a global understanding of what a professional doctorate is and the multiple ways through which one can achieve a doctoral qualification. Another one of the key challenges that face our students that we need to be mindful of during the doctoral programme is that life happens. And I just wanted to briefly just tell you a little bit about Olivia. Olivia came to the programme with an absolute ambition for economic capital. She was very mindful that an investment in education was highly likely to result in an economic return for her. So she was very minded to study for the doctorate. Unfortunately, after about 6 months of study, Olivia was faced with the death of her husband, and that really made her reflect and think and struggle about whether or not to continue with the doctorate. And she took a pause from study, but with the support from her family and friends, she came back to the programme. Unfortunately, another year passed, and then her mother passed away. And at that time, she was very ready to throw the towel in and give up on her studies, but she didn't. And it's with some happiness and pride, I suppose, as her supervisor, that I can say she did complete her doctorate, and she is now the director of her own company. And she talks very eloquently about the important role of the professional doctorate, not only economically, but socially and individually as well. So it's a really clear example of how challenges can be overcome and merits achieved. I'll move on and talk a little bit about the merits of undertaking a doctorate. And I'll move on to John. He started his doctorate 4 years ago, and he successfully defended his thesis earlier this year. He is a UK doctoral student who started the programme with lots of determination but minimal expectation. And he undertook a 4-year journey of self-discovery, and by anybody's standards, he is now a success. Ironically, even though he didn't value the doctorate and doesn't value the education system, he undertook the doctorate in order to beat the system, to see if he could actually achieve the doctorate. He felt that he wasn't really a scholar, that he felt very much like an imposter. He achieved his doctorate and is now working in a high-level position in the education system, encouraging young people to challenge their own values and beliefs about what education is for, and he considers himself to be a researching professional. Another success, I argue, is Sarah. She's a real interesting individual. She's an expert in her profession, but has chosen to develop her career in academia. She's really interested in knowledge, and she's interested in how and to what extent academic curriculums meet the needs of the employers. So how are we making sure that the curriculum that is being provided in academic institutions meet and talk to the graduate destinations of those students? And using her own professional knowledge, she's undertaking a study that will enable knowledge growth within the academic community. And it's generally accepted that such investment in this graduate level education will result in some economic rewards, both for the individual and for themselves. But she's using that professional knowledge and analysing the existing curriculum to make sure that professionals working in the field understand the requirements and expectations of new graduates entering the workforce. She'll be able to contribute to the creation of new curriculum design, and she'll make sure that the academic programme is fit for purpose for the academic knowledge and industrial application. That's a very brief overview of some of the examples of the challenges and merits associated with studying for a professional doctorate, which, as I've said, is it's a significant investment in time. It's important to recognise there are many of these stories available. They're not unique, but the idea of resulting researching professionals is the justification for undertaking some sort of professional doctorate qualification. Certainly, the idea of an imposter phenomenon exists amongst many of these doctoral candidates, and they spend quite some time reflecting on whether they have the academic skills to complete a doctoral level qualification. For me, I would argue all doctoral routes should have the potential to influence and inform policy, practice, and research for the future. It should have meaning, it should have merit. It's important that we now work together to develop a global standard and understanding of what a doctoral level qualification is, and that we have an opportunity to ensure that individual growth has practical application. Some of the key characteristics for success of a professional doctorate are the importance of context, so recognising those cultural sensitivities, and the value for both academia and industry for a researching professional. The opportunity to disseminate new knowledge beyond the borders of academia are critical here. And what often has happened historically is when individuals have undertaken a doctorate is that the new knowledge is lost to the industry and it becomes embedded in academic journals which the profession don't often read. The professional doctorate has an important and significant contribution to make to the landscape of knowledge creation, enabling professional knowledge to advance grounded on a strong evidence base developed by professionals in the field for professionals in the field. In my experience as a teacher of professional doctorates and as supervisor of professional doctorates, I can confirm the original outputs created from such research is important in advancing knowledge and understanding. But what is critical for us now is that we all better understand the value of a professional doctorate, and we take some time to develop a global standard. Thank you very much.